first of all, on whether or not you feel like you're being partisan. I truly believe your aim when you come out here on a daily basis and engage me in debate is to be as honest as you can aim the dart. But to suggest you're not being partisan is not being honest with yourself. I try to be honest with myself. We all do. We all have our biases, and we all have some extent of partisanship in us. Here's where your partisanship is failing you. You said, if there were the mirror image of this in a Democratic administration, you'd say the same thing.
Absolutely.
But you are only seeing some things in the mirror. The mirror you're looking into is subjective. You cannot deny it. It is. And here's the cost of your overreaction, because you're not the only one.
In what way is it subjective?
You see all the bad, you see none of the good, you see all of the things you hate, none of the things you can accept, you see all of the things in this administration, and you don't see them in past. And I'm going to lay this out for you. Here's the illustration of the cost. And I think, number one, Danny Amendola tweets out a thank you, a shout out for the president bringing him up, and he has to pull down the tweet because he is universally excoriated.
Yeah.
Number two, I agree, Stephen A. The president was extremely political. The craziness yesterday encompassed everyone. You do not neglect to mention the greatest football player, the greatest quarterback of all time, because he didn't show up. Here's the real cost, Max. You talked about alternative facts. Yesterday, the New York Times tweeted out two different pictures. Number one, of how the team looked when it showed up under Obama. Number two, when it showed up under Trump. The Patriots, later that day, tweeted out... You gotta be
kidding. You're really bringing that up?
Yeah, and I'm going to finish
it. Or you're joking about that, right?
Zero joking.
Okay.
This is the cost.
So in other
you
words,
undercut credibility because you've lost.
Wait, one second. Can I just hear the New York Times part?
The New York Times tweeted out two pictures. One when the Patriots showed up in 2015 under Obama. One they showed up yesterday. And the insinuation was, look at the difference in the size of the turnout of the team.
Got it.
Number one, they were not comparable. The one from Obama's administration showed staff. The one from Trump showed just the team. Okay. The Patriots tweeted this themselves. They corrected the New York Times on their flaws. Max, here's the point.
No, this is the damage that you're doing right now. It's precisely the opposite.
I didn't put out falsehood. I didn't put out
Well, it's precisely
lies.
The opposite, because there are times when media can behave in a partisan way and not put things in proper context. And when they are called out on it, it is proper and good. I'm not denying that. However, for an administration that talks about fake news when they are the generators of it, that went on a Soviet-style, fed and apparently a disinformation campaign, for you now to point out an instance where a reputable, legitimate media organization erred, rather than the million times that the administration did, is to create a sense of false equivalency and give them precisely the kind of publicity for the ammo that they're seeking.
This idea.
That is the damage.
If I am doing damage by pointing out the truth and pointing out the falsehoods, then so be it.
Where
because let me explain to you something.
The New York Times or the Trump administration, Will?
Both.
No, it's equivalent? There's an equivalence?
Max, I'm not drawing...
That's a question. Is there an equivalence, yes or no?
Max, I'm not drawing a broad brush and suggesting the Trump administration is telling all truths and the New York Times is telling all lies. But in this particular instance, on the news story we're talking about today with the New England Patriots, the lie is not coming from the Trump administration. It's coming from the New York Times. And it's been corrected. It's my job, as it is yours, to tell the truth when it is presented. And by the way, if you ask me on any given occasion when the Trump administration has lied and it's connected to sports,
sure,
because that's my job to talk about sports, I'll point it out. But I will not, under some idea of worrying about false equivalency, perpetuate a lie.
However many times we've talked about this subject politically, you have now mentioned something that the New York Times did, that the administration...
Because I'm in sports.
That the Patriots pointed out one time, and that represents some large percentage of the times that we've discussed.
It's a sports story, Max.
This period.
It's a sports story.
So if we're talking about the White House press secretary versus the New York Times,
we're not.
Who is more credible based on...
We're not talking about that. Because this is First Take, and this is sports.
No, yes, but we are, and that's the point about normalizing it. That's the point about the athlete showing up. It becomes a political moment.
Talking about
There's no way around it.
I'm talking about a sports moment yesterday. I'm not talking about Sean Spicer on a day-to-day basis.